Umpire LaFondiose, thank you for joining me.
My
The
pleasure.
tables the tables have turned. Normally you're on the other side of this interviewing table, but the masses demand to hear the backstory of Paul LaFondiose.
The
And so
tables have turned.
the turntables. Uh, no, you've been doing an amazing job interviewing everyone, and
Well, thank you.
I wanted to give you a chance to share your journey and experience. So I'll be interviewing you today. Let's
Yeah, my
start
pleasure.
with where are you from? What part of the world do you come from?
I'm from California, Napa, California, the wine country.
Okay, I actually
That's
did
where I
not
grew up.
know that
Yeah,
because
and I'm
now
sitting
you
in
live in.
Napa, California right now because I'm
Now
visiting
you are.
family.
I think when you joined, you're in Colorado, but you since moved to South Carolina, right?
That's right, for family reasons. So
Yeah.
I'm taking
Do you,
care of family on both coasts.
all right. Do you hope to
Yeah.
move back to California one day?
No, no, just taking care of family. So living in South Carolina, which is great because it's East Coast adjacent. Or it's on the East Coast, and so I can keep track of things there. And I travel back to California for family reasons. But yeah,
Excellent. So tell me your background in wargaming and then in Kriegsspiel and kind of your journey. What brought you ultimately to the IKS?
sure,
What's your journey and story there?
sure. So was a board war gamer to start. Big Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master. So I
Okay.
think dungeon mastering was the genesis of my interest in Kriegspiel. And I always remember when I was a dungeon master thinking, this, five characters slaying three orcs is fine, but how do you do it with thousands and thousands like it was done in history? So I was interested in growing it even back then, but there weren't any real systems. This was back in the old days. So, and my friends weren't really that interested in it. So I had all the Avalon Hill stuff, GDW, all those games, a lot of Hex Encounter, France 1940, Third Reich, all those kind of great classic games. And usually bought them first or second editions. That tells you my vintage. And not as a collector, I bought them out of a drugstore at first or second edition. But anyways, I decided when I was about the age of most of the people in the IKS that I was going to do this for real. I wasn't just going to play games. I was going to do it for real. So I joined the military, went to the military academy, and became a lieutenant in the Army. At which point, I completely stopped playing all war games because I was too busy to do anything else. So, spent time in the Army as an officer. I was an intelligence officer, so I was a planner. I was on staffs. I love planning, and that carries forward to Kriegsspiel because the planning process is my favorite part of the whole thing. And after I got out of the Army, Desert Storm, I was in that. So that gives you another sense for how my vintage. But I went over and served in that. And then I got out after that because the war was won and war was no more, and went into business. So worked for different companies, and I worked for companies like Ticketmaster and Disney and companies like that, doing mostly operations. And during that time, I went to work for Disney's gaming group and actually met a huge number of uh, game designers and just absolutely fell in love with it. So I had a chance to sit in rooms with some very famous game designers and listen to them talk about games, and it was one of the most fun things I ever did. So I always vowed that I would go back to gaming when I could, but I didn't really game. I had Total War. I had the operational art of war on my computer. I played a bunch of real time strategy things lightly, but didn't really have any time to do wargaming. So I stopped doing commercial work because I didn't need to work anymore. And I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I was kind of banging around. And I found Little Wars TV and said, oh, shoot, that was like the stuff I used to do when I was a kid. I got kind of hooked on it. And like you, I actually created a PowerPoint version of American Revolution, a Revolutionary War Battle of Bennington, which I
Hmm.
researched myself, and I had the whole thing set up based on their rule set. Um, and then I went into the Little Wars TV um, Discord, and I was really resisting buying miniatures because I didn't really want to collect stuff. And there was a post by Miles that said, check out the IKS. And so I clicked on that and I went in, and a week later I was playing the Quatre Bras Grand Waterloo game, and they gave me a cavalry regiment. And I'd actually served in the army and had been in, I guess, what you would call combat. And I was more nervous about that cavalry regiment than I had ever been in real life. And I said, okay,
Wow,
this
interesting.
is the game for me. And some of the big characters like yourself and Chief and Blazer Trail were all in there. And I just said, these are, and I was reading the strings and I was saying, I don't know what it is about this group, but these are my people. And so I dropped all my other hobbies and everything and became an IKS enthusiast. That's how I came here.
Very nice. I knew some of your story, but I didn't even know all of that. That's very interesting to
Yeah.
come from that. So I know you've dabbled around for a little bit until you kind of settled on a time period. So I think I know the answer to this question, but if you had to pick a favorite time period, what would you say it is?
Well, I actually have interest in a lot of periods, and I choose the period of 1858 to 1882 Prussia just simply because I'm the type of wargamer slash umpire that goes very, very, very deep on one topic. So that's a conscious choice. But I love World War II. I love science fiction. If I could really do anything, I'd probably do mostly science fiction. I'm an avid science fiction reader. My original idea was actually some of these very mind bending um, Ian Banks and Neil Asher type of British science fiction authors, Greg Bear's Recursion, like all these kind of like really mind bending, go to the edge of entropy stories over thousands of years is the stuff that I really enjoy reading. But I also looked at the time when I joined, and you might remember this period. It was very much about ACW or
Yeah.
Napoleonics. It was like that was exclusively what the IKS was, and so like young John Greenwood, who I'm a fan of, who going back to the original rules, I started researching the original rules. I reached out to Jan Heinemann saying, hey, I was just like, what are the original rules? Because I was thinking about becoming capable with those. And I just found it interesting that the period where Kriegsspiel became the most used, which was the Moltke period, was underrepresented. So the 1858 to 1882 period was underrepresented, and the Prussians themselves were actually underrepresented. The Prussians, the period during which they actually developed Kriegsspiel, there wasn't a lot of it out there, and nobody's fault. It was just, and I think it's 1914, 1933 on. The obvious reason is the German machine, other than in kind of mimetic ways, was actually not that popular. So the German system became not that popular for reasons that are cultural and appropriate. So the whole Prussian period is kind of not explored. So I got interested in that, and then I found the Moltke problems, and that really kicked off something very historically interesting because I found that I pulled out a Google map and I just in Google figured out what the Polish town names were for the Prussian, and then I basically did a Moltke problem. I think it was number 32 or 33, and it was like scales fell from my eyes and I realized that these problems were amazing but like they were impossible to read.
Hmm.
So I became enthusiastic about the Moltke problems because I thought that they were a treasure that were just kind of buried under all this arcane language and different town names and no maps. So I got kind of into that.
That's very interesting. And do you intend? I know you've got your YouTube videos that you do for each problem, and you're well into covering all of them. Do you intend to publish anything at the end, like summarizing all the problems, like in a
I
book
have
or anything like that?
rewritten that book. Yes, I've rewritten that book. I have 300 and some pages rewritten, and I have about 40 of the maps redone. So the hard part is to go back and redo the maps because some of the
Yeah.
maps are campaign in scale and they're quite so. Take one of these incredibly complicated and detailed maps that are done by our colleagues in the IKS. You've got to do 66 of those, and so I've done about I've roughed out all 66 in basic, but I need to get down into just knocking them out. But I've actually rewritten it in plain English. So in the Moltke books, and I think this is kind of a translation of a translation problem. And sometimes they'll call it the friendly force. Other times they'll call it the blue. Other times they'll call it. They won't even tell you who's friendly and who's not, and you have to really read it to figure it out. So I just have gone through and I've standardized it, saying you command this force, the enemy is doing that. So just to make it so that every problem you read is very simple English, and um, and then put them to maps that are scaled correctly, so you can actually see what the problem is. And so by doing that, it makes it very readable and it makes it very accessible. And I'm now 70% of the way through that project, and I plan this year to complete that, where I publish that book.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'll probably be one of your buyers once it's
Well, good. Yeah.
published.
And it'll be like a $5 or $6 book. It's not a money making proposition as much as making it available to for download on Kindle, for
Okay,
example. You got to kind of charge a little bit for it.
very nice. Going along with that, what's your approach for maps? How do you make your maps? What skill set do you use? Program that kind of thing.
So going back to the beginning, maps were my biggest problem. So when we all start as umpires, I when you talk to a new umpire, there's always one area that they get bogged down in: order of battle, research, rule sets, right? So you tend to gravitate toward one area and then go deep on it and then find out, geez, I haven't created a game. I'm just researching my 40th rule set, for example. So for me, it was maps
Hmm.
because I wanted a nicely represented map that you could actually use, and I didn't like. And we've as a group and as a community have come a long way on maps. I mean, if you look at where we are today, if you remember where we were a couple of years ago, we were mostly doing historical maps and trying to erase the units that were on it. And yourself were an innovator in that, using GIMP to teach us how to do that, right? So you get these very it's the thousand town effect. So you get this historical map with 1,000 tiny towns on it, and it was impossible to play on the thing because people would be giving you a town name, and as an umpire, you're searching through the whole map. So I wanted to learn how to make maps, but that took me down this case of GIMP, and I reached out to you on that, and I probably put more time into maps than anything, and I've ended up at Photoshop,
Hmm.
and I am a tracer of historical maps. So I don't let any of the original maps show. I trace it completely, and I've learned from Damon's. I shamelessly stole techniques from Damon on how to use layer styles to create hills and patterns and all sorts of and rivers. Um, and Damon very kindly explained it all to us. And so I basically have a very standard way that I make the maps by tracing in Photoshop, and that's my approach to maps. I can now make a map for a battle in 3 hours.
Wow, that's really good.
They all look the same in terms of the style. You should be able to look at every LaFondiose map and say, okay, yeah, that's his thing, because they're all the same setup in Photoshop, but I
Yeah,
can
they do
trace
have a
pretty quickly. Yeah,
signature style for sure.
yeah.
Um, Going along with that, what would you say is your game design process when you're setting up a new scenario or a new game? What's the process you go through to make it a success that it is?
Yeah. So I start with the number of players, and I map the number of players to the historical scenario. And it doesn't mean that fewer players is a smaller battle. It's just I literally say, okay, there's going to be 12 people in this playing this game, and I want to do the Battle of Königgrätz. So therefore, I need each player to be doing a core, because that's just numerically, that's just what makes sense. So I start with looking at the holistic player experience, and I have to have that make sense. I don't limit it in terms of the size of the battle. Like right now, we're doing a army versus army battle, right? But that's how I do it, is because I want to make sure that each player has the right kind of number of units beneath them, and that the scenario is not out of hand. So I start there, and then I start to design outward in terms of the nature of the scenario, such that there are multiple problems to solve. So it's not just line up and fire at each other. So I usually try to put some elements in there that each side has to make multiple choices. You have to deploy a reserve along multiple lines. And I just try to make the problem interesting around that. And then I get the map together. I always use the same pieces. I always use Prussian versus Prussian. I'm very boring on my orders of battle. The players who play my games know that they have Krupp C62 version rifled cannon that can fire 2,500 meters. It's the same every time because I don't want variability on the order of battle, or I'm sorry, on the forces. I want variability on the problems. And so I use the same forces every time, almost like um, chess pieces. So the bishop is the bishop, but the nature of the problem is different. So that's my approach, and I think that the people like it. So I have a the Moltke server has about we have 31 people who regularly are invited to games. You yourself are in that server as well, and we'll get 21 to 26 players per game. So it's a good group.
Yeah, you kind of curated a group that I don't know because you have a certain style to your games, and so you've it's not necessarily for everyone, and so you've found, I'd say, found a group that fits that style well and aligns with how it works. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much that. It's like it is a very specific style, approach, and type of experience, and that people who like that will gravitate toward it. People who don't, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had to pick your favorite game that you've played in, we'll do two. One that you've
Yeah.
played in as a player and one that you've ran. What would you say? What comes to memory as one of your favorites?
All the games that I like are ruse games.
Okay.
Um, and I've had dinner with Ruse. I consider him a friend. Um, all of his games are from the saddle and quite complex in terms of their approach. And um, two are neck and neck. One is the Red River game that he did, which was a campaign where he was trying out some new dynamics and approaches in terms of creating the command experience. That was terrific. And then the very first one was the Battle of Alexandria, where I had a very subordinate role. I was actually the reserve. I was the guy in the corner that didn't get a chance to do much, and I did one attack, and it was successful. But that was an early game, but it was very exciting. But in that, I learned the reason I liked that game so much is that it was a sandbox for imagination, and I essentially created my character, and I created a whole um, kind of universe around this regiment
Mm-hmm.
that was a lot of fun. And Rouge just kind of went with it. And I had like a Batman who was always drunk, and I created this whole thing because there was nothing to do, but I just went with it, and it was a lot of fun. And I learned there that you can, as a player, you can create your own experience regardless of what the umpire hands you. So I really enjoyed those games. But I think Rouge is a great umpire. He's a busy guy, so it's hard to get him to get time to do this. But those are my two favorite that I played.
Yeah, his games are always really good. He does. He's probably the best. I'm trying to think if there's any better at making you really feel like you're there commanding and you've got real troops. And the way he gives his descriptions and updates, it really does make you feel like you're in the saddle.
He gives me straight feedback on this isn't working. So,
Yeah.
which is great and not unkind, but he's like right to the point. Which I think he's really had a great influence on me. You've had a great influence in terms of I think how I learned how to set up quickly. I actually learned how to umpire from you, James Horton plug, right? So you taught me some of the basics of setup and and all that. So I think I
You
love
can't
this idea that we learn from each other.
say
Love it.
bad things behind my back because I'm here this
Yeah,
time.
well, even though you do have your secret dungeon lair where there are shrieking umpires down there who don't follow you.
Well, it's my yacht. I invite people to my yacht, and then they disappear. Apparently.
You have a dungeon lair where you have new umpires who refuse to help you with your newcomer games, who are like locked down there in these endless turn cycles. I know what you're doing. Right?
What
Um,
about a game that you ran, one of your own games? If you had to pick a favorite, it might be like picking a favorite child, but if you had to, uh,
no, I actually have no problem with picking games because they each have a different purpose. So I had my first universe that I created. So I always play series. I don't like
mm,
create a game and like run it and then say, okay, I've done my ancients game. Now I'm going to do a science fiction game. So I've run three series now. The first series was Fractured States. It was an alternative universe in 1870 in the United States where the U.S. never really resolved the Civil War. It just the whole country just collapsed, and so it was like a Mad Max meets Dungeons and Dragons meets regimental combat. So in this world, the Austrians, because those poor Austrians are always picked on, were like they sent a contingent to the U.S. And the British were there, and all sorts of. I thought it was a really interesting idea. It fell apart because the players wouldn't play along with the conceit that you had to all play in the same battle. So in Dungeons and Dragons, when you get an adventure group together and six of you come together, you say, okay, we're going to go explore a dungeon together. It's never a good Dungeons and Dragons sessions where everyone says, no, I want to explore a different dungeon, and everybody goes off in different directions because the fundamental conceit is you got to stay together to have the one dungeon master. Well, my players, for some reason, just couldn't get that in their heads, and they all wanted to go all over the U.S. and set up empires and do stuff. They wanted to basically play a Diplo game. I said, no, 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 we're not doing that. So it kind of the fractured stage fractured for that reasons. But there was one game that was a train. I think you were even in this. You might have been in this one, but where they were
I
they were
remember the
guarding a
train.
train, and the interpersonal dynamics and the crazy action on that thing was so much. I was laughing every turn at like the wackiness. At one point, one of the players fired through the window at another player and hit another player on the other side, and it was a die roll. And I was laughing, and my wife was like, "What are you laughing at?" And I was like, "It's one of these crazy games." So that was a lot of fun. And the guys were creating uniforms and all sorts of the imagination was role playing esque in terms of its so that was a lot of fun, but it couldn't sustain itself because the players wanted to basically do a Diplo game, and I was that's I'm not a fan of Diplo games. So that was a fun one. I really enjoyed. There was a World War II Eastern Front game, the Eastern Front battle, Russian German battle. That was a lot of fun because it was a chance to really flex some new muscles with World War II. So I really enjoyed that one. And then on the Moltke, man, there have been so many terrific efforts by the players. It's hard to pick one out. But we had it was based on Moltke problem uh, 41, where there was a river and you had to go over two bridges, and just the crazy timing of it and the thoughtfulness. And it was when the Molka server was really picking up steam. That was a lot of fun. Um, so those are three examples of games that all had different purpose, but they were all very highly rated by myself. I love all my games. There's only one game that I did not set up well that was less than interesting, and I'm not gonna mention which one that was. So
That's fine. What would you say for those, newer
yeah,
umpires? What would you say were the lessons you learned from that one that you took away to make your other games
the
better?
one that
The one that didn't go well.
I was too rigid on following a formula for the 15-minute turns. This was earlier in my career, and so what happened is that historically, it was a historical World War II scenario. Historically, the two sides had a meeting engagement, and so I assumed that the players would just kind of do that. But one side decided to go basically hole up and create a hedgehog defense. but they did it all the way at the very far corner of the map, while
Mm.
Hendrik was the CIC for the Japanese. It was a Japanese jungle warfare. You were in this one. You were
Oh, yeah, I
a
was in that one. I
brigade
remember that.
commander. And Hendrik set up this incredibly detailed, well done plan to go a broad front strategy where everyone kind of marched along these timelines. So it was a huge marching simulator for everybody. And I was kind of so the two not mistakes. The two things to learn there was, one is that players will always do the weird thing and not do what you expect them to. And the other is, faced with that situation, what I could have done is accelerated the whole game and said, okay, you're all now here. It's now 3 a.m. It's 8 hours later. You march to the jungle just to get to the action faster. But instead, I
Yeah,
kind of
fast forward.
grounded out across the whole board. So those were two lessons early on, and that led to my now doing variable time turns, because what I'm doing is I accelerate to where the decision point in the action is, versus saying no, it's got to be exactly 15 minutes or 16 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, that was a good lesson learned. Well, what are your plans for future games? What do you have in the works? I don't know how
So
far you have
a
it planned
ton,
ahead, but what do you think?
a ton going on, right? So there's kind of three streams that I'm interested in. Um, First, I love live gaming, and you and I did live gaming in California to start. You've done live gaming in Texas. I've gone to Origins. We're both kind of in parallel working on live gaming. I love live gaming,
And by
and
live gaming, you mean in-person live gaming?
in person Kriegsspiel, where you walk to a table and there's people around the table. They're all looking up and like freaking out, writing on cards, and there's love that, right? It's so much fun. You can't do it all the time. You can't, like, we can't have a live game with autos sitting over in Finland, or with KB or whatever. But it was Laser Trail. I mean, Melchett. We can't do that, right? But it's just a terrific format, and so I want to develop more in that area, up to and including publishing a set that people can buy, so we can do more live gaming. And so I've got a print and play out. I'm going to put 5 scenarios on that, and I'm working with a publisher to try to get a very basic set published, so that it just gets it in everybody's hands, and we can do more of that. So the live gaming is a whole new area of interest, and that'd be basic scenarios, and then a developer kit where umpires could then make a scenario they're interested in and map it back to a live set. So it's kind of solving that whole
Nice.
problem. I think is interesting. That's one thing I've got on the
Will
docket.
you? Do you intend to keep going to conventions and like
Oh
even
yeah, yeah.
like
No,
I don't know about sell, but like distribute the
the second thing I'm doing is that playing, and you're seeing this in the game now. I'm playing with this. The new. I want to find the perfect format for online around balancing AI, campaign level, tactical, to create something new and better, or innovative in the hobby. So, kind of pushing the boundary a little bit for the betterment of the hobby, right? So, like, how to use AI tools to make it better, not to replace the umpire, but to actually accelerate the umpire. So it's all like using these tools to kind of come up with new ideas, and you're seeing some of that now with the game we're doing now.
Are you using AI to like generate some of your news broadcasts and other things that in
The
that
AI
game?
generates the text of the news broadcast. And they generates all the images. So right
Wow.
now in the games, what we do is the report has an oil painting from the period 1870 with each report, every report, and that it's an oil painting created for that report. It's actually an oil painting of the report. Now, it's not exactly correct because AI can't do that. But when you have a cavalry unit charging down a hill, there is an oil painting of a cavalry unit charging down a hill, right? So
That's pretty cool.
playing with this idea, and then the news reports have line and ink drawings of what a newspaper article would look like back in 1870. So these are all. There's no way a human being could do a full oil painting for. Right now, we have 28 players in this game we're playing, so we're doing 25 reports. You couldn't do 25 oil paintings in an hour, but AI can. But AI does not write the report. I write the report, and Rebel Squirrel's helping me with these reports on this version, right? So how do we use AI intelligently by keeping the humans in the center, the socialness in the center, and then use it to accelerate the experience? So I'm interested. So that's another lane that I'm kind of working on.
Was there a number three, or is it just those two?
This idea of so there's this guy named Weber who came up with this idea of 1,000 raving fans, and this is it's from a bit. Seth Godin actually talked about this, right? But the idea is that an artist can support him or herself if they have 1,000 raving fans. And so I asked it on the podcast, but what do you do as an umpire if you're so good that you have 1,000 raving fans? What does that look like? It's not about money, really. It's about how do you deal with having 1,000 raving fans? And I can tell you, I have 31 people who are really enthusiastic about what we do on the Moltke server, and it's hard to help. It's hard to provide them all product.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if we had 1,000, right? 2,500 people liked the Moltke problems on my YouTube and signed up. So having 1,000 raving fans is not a crazy idea. So I think it would be interesting if the umpire community, we could think about, well, what would you do if you had 1,000 people who were so enthusiastic about what you did, they'd travel to a convention to see you, they'd pay some money to be in your games, they'd wear a T-shirt, I don't know, right? What would that look like? Because we're artists,
Yeah.
we're artists, right? Umpires are artists because you're creating a product that entertains, but it's visual, it's got story, it's got all that stuff, right? So it's a form of art, and we build fan bases. So what is it like to have 1,000 raving fans? So I not only would I like to build 1,000 raving fans, but what does it mean? I think that's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, it is. I think part of the difficulty with Kriegsspiel and what we do is it's hard to scale because most games are a big game is 20 to 30 people. Smaller games are 10 to 20, and some umpires can handle maybe 2 to 3 games at a time. But even then, that's you know if I run 3 games at a time with 30 people each, it's not even 100. So how do you a single person could be running games for 1,000 people like in the way that we do currently. So it'd have to be something different. It's hard to scale up beyond that.
You state the problem exactly right. So if you had 1,000 people who thought James Horton, the sun rose and set on James Horton's gaming, what would you do? Well, you can't have a game with 1,000 people in it. You can't say, okay, 900 and 90 of you don't get to play, but 10 of you can,
Yeah.
because that's silly too, right? The flip side of it is, how do you build 1,000 fans? Right now, some umpires are going to hear this and say, "Oh, I don't want 1,000 fans. I got my." That's fine too, right? So there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But I think I just, I just think it's an interesting problem to solve. Is to say, how do you become an artist that has 1,000 fans, and what do you do with that? You have live gaming where you can actually meet with your fans and play with them, and then you have this idea of using AI to create these amazing personal and social experiences online. I think those three lanes are enough to keep me busy for 20 years.
Interesting. Yeah. I think your background, uh, your professional background, lends you well to thinking big picture about where Kriegsspiel could go. Um, so
I've seen it. I've seen it explored, gaming explored online. My commercial experience was coming up through online stuff, so e-commerce and things like that. So I've had a chance to be in the rooms where a lot of this is talked about. So I have some pattern recognition on that as all. Um, and I think that um, these are interesting, big questions to answer. But likewise, it's like if I'm a new umpire and I feel nervous around 4 people, how do I get my first game going? I'd love to dive into that too. You know what I mean? I love to dive into that too.
yeah.
And where all this comes from is there was a funny experience that it's one of those things that impacts your life, right? So I was sitting down in one of my this is like right after my first Blazer Trail Quatre Bras pre Grand Waterloo game. And I said, oh, this Kriegsspiel is amazing. I love it. And so I was sat down to basically do more research, right? And there was a special on the TV that my wife and I were watching on Shaun White, who is the American snowboarder. He's a legend. He's also a great skateboarder, and he is a legend. And there was just a special on him, but it was about his life. And I was there looking at my Kriegsspiel stuff, and he was talking about the amount of work it took to be great. And what popped into my head was, what would it be like to be the Shaun White of umpiring Kriegsspiel? What is that? Kobe Bryant, you know, you insert sports hero here, whatever country you're in has a sports hero, right? What would it be like to be the Michael Jordan of Kriegsspiel umpiring? What would that be? And I don't think we talk about it enough to be like, and it's not like competitive, it's like who's better. It's like to be truly unbelievably great. Like to be like shockingly great. And there's room for 50 great umpires. It's not like we're competing. There's an infinite amount of skill you can put into it, right? But and I appreciate your collaboration on the active umpire conversation. It's like, because I think the active umpire, a little bit of like, okay, great, we can be active and just like throwing out a Warhammer scenario because it kind of looks like a thing. But no, what does it mean to be really great? And we have some
Yeah,
great umpires. And this podcast, you listen to these umpires, mind blowing, right? The talent. So
yeah. I mean, we have a lot of good slash great umpires. All the master umpires for sure. You know, they're good at what they do.
yeah,
It's a good question because I think like a truly what I think of it a title like a grandmaster umpire, someone that can create this experience for the player that like we talk about what Ruse does.
hmm
Really, really makes it a lived experience. Makes you feel like you're there. Gives you all the feelings that that a commander would have at that time, and just a
absolutely.
really amazing, life changing experience for people.
Yeah,
That's hard to
I think the creation of a grandmaster concept is not like a certification like you go get your driver's license, you become a grandmaster. That's all nonsense, right? Grandmaster is a state where it's like you are transcendent, like you create games that people are so blown away by. And that's what a grandmaster does at a painter, right? People are so blown away by your work. And that doesn't there's no certifying body for that. There's just like the awesomeness of what you create. I think
just do it.
that's an interesting idea. Now most people who do IKS are early in their lives, they're college students, they got their whole life ahead of them, they're going to get busy, totally fine, right? It's totally fine. So I'm not saying if you're studying your exams, you should not study your exams so you can become a grandmaster umpire. Please don't do that, right? Do not do that. Go study so you can get your accounting degree and you can make your money and be like Miles of Little War TV, who's my hero, right? So he does finance and then he plays war games. The guy's a genius.
Yeah,
Um, and you met Miles recently, so you know he's a genius, right? So I met him in person anyway. So go. You have to go take care of that. But I do think for those of us who have a little room in life, if you aspire to be great at something, this is a hobby where you can be anywhere in the world and do it. It's actually you can do it for free. You don't have to pay a bunch of money to do it. It's very social. I consider the IKS people my friends as much as my people in real life, right? And so you can be great at a thing that doesn't cost you a lot of money, which means you can do it forever and it keeps you cognitively engaged. You can do it till you're 90 years old. And even Otto will become 90 someday. He doesn't believe it right now, but even our beloved Otto will age. So,
he'll still look like he's 16 when he's
he will.
90.
He will. He will. Actually, I know. Here's my theory. I think Otto and Achilles are the same person. and that they've just been like they're like the Dorian Gray. Achilles is just the version that ages, and Otto will stay young forever.
Could be it. I'm actually in that vein. So for my birthday, I had an in-person. I wanted to run an in-person Kriegsspiel group here in
Right.
Texas, and just with some friends, and they all loved it. Of course, who doesn't love Kriegsspiel? But we're going to start a monthly in-person Kriegsspiel group, and I have some ideas for things I want to try. So in that same idea of getting better, there's things I want to do with this in-person group that I don't get really to do with my online live game or even play-by-post. So I'm excited.
That's great.
I
Yeah,
think,
that's. I think that's terrific. That's terrific. I'm looking. I'm going to put something together. I have so much going on. I don't have time to create a local club, um, and so I've parked that idea. I've got to park it, but I love doing live so much that I would love to do that. But I have a couple of corporate people that want me to do leadership trainings with Kriegspiel. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do with this once
yeah.
you become really really good at it.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Another question for you.
sure.
I saw you asking everyone this, and I've enjoyed hearing everyone's responses. So, what is your approach and thoughts on screenshots?
Well, you taught me about screenshots, so I just say, well, I use the James, make it a little looser. I
Uh,
I think I used to be very tight on screenshots when I started. I think of screenshots as the body of information visually delivered that includes reports from others. So I never like screen it with a hill because I assume that a staff officer's gone to the top of the hill and looked on the other side. Um, what I will do on my screenshots is I will actually move enemy commanders out of the screenshot so that what the player gets is only the units of the enemy.
hmm,
So they can't say, "Oh, that's the third division," that's the fourth, and the reason for that is not because enemies across the field would actually know which units the other side were because they studied each other.
right.
But I don't want to give away the boundary point between units because then it becomes obvious if the third regiment's on the left hand side and the second regiment's on the right hand side, then they'll probably attack in this way. So I like just a
Hmm,
massive soldiery out there. So I will actually, when I do my screenshots, I'll move all the command tokens out of the screenshot and then move them back into the screenshot. And I make some errors sometimes, right? But I try to make it so that you can't actually game the other side's dispositions by seeing the command tokens. And I absolutely hate tokens. I don't use tokens of any type. I use all meta information inside TTS for my informational needs, but I never let the enemy know who's breaking or I just I don't like that kind of play. I think
fair.
you might see the other side's breaking a little bit, but you wouldn't be able to kind of min max it by saying, "Oh, look, they're at the yellow token stage. If I shoot one more time, they'll get to the red token stage." I don't like that. I know some of
Yeah,
your system uses that, but I don't like that.
good.
So
Everyone has their own way. There's nothing
yeah,
wrong with one or the other, so
yeah.
it's a good approach. All right, so we're coming up. We don't want to go too long, but you've had how long have you been doing this? Definitely over a year, but you've
Two
been on
years.
this amazing 2 years.
2 years.
Wow, time has flown. You've been on this amazing umpiring journey. You're one of the most prolific umpires in terms of games run. I think Swentz has probably surpassed you already, but you're probably one of the few that's actually close to catching up to me in terms of games run.
Wentz is
But
surprising the
I don't,
beloved
he's
Wentz.
how many games do you think you've run, or do you know
I can tell
exactly?
you exactly because I log every single one of them. I have actually lead umpired 57 games. I've assistant umpired 21. So
Okay,
78 games.
so he's done. I don't think he's done live ever, but I know he's. I think he's done at least 40 or 50, maybe.
So
Anyway,
I've
we'll have to
done,
get him to comment on the
and
on
it's not a
YouTube.
competition, but I've done
No,
78 games. And I've only actually played in 22 games.
so you're umpiring more than playing.
Yeah.
But sorry, my
Yeah.
question is from
Sure.
that 2 years and that, having run that many games, what advice would you give to other umpires, especially new umpires that are coming into the IKS and want to umpire? Um, and what general advice would you give to them?
This is this this position has changed um, from early days. So find a period that you're excited about, a period, and that you've read a ton about, and that you have read a lot of battle accounts about to start with. So if you have read every single battle account from World War II, and you know like how a platoon went and how the mortars were firing and how they called in air support and all that, start there, right? You will make mistakes on the actual, mechanics of how all of it works. But when it comes to writing reports and you have a platoon firing at a platoon, your reports are going to come right out of your pattern recognition of the way that battle would have gone down. And you're going to rely less on die rolls and more about, well, I think a German platoon in this position would do this to a British platoon that was attacking across an open square or whatever, right? So find something you're excited about, but do not do your perfect battle. Don't do your dream battle. So if you dream of the Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy, don't start there. Start with some smaller battle in the period you love and make your mistakes. And so then you'll find, like, so I will admit to you, James, and to the IKS community that I'm not a fan of the Napoleonic period. I don't know why it just falls flat for me. I'm not a big fan. I get why people love it. It's just not my thing. I can't get any excitement out of playing it or umpiring it. It's just my thing, right? But like 1870s, American Civil War and Franco-Prussian War, I'm gaga for it, right? It's just how it falls, right? So if I insisted on doing the Napoleonic battle for my first, I would have lost interest, right? So my first one was an ACW adjacent fictional one, right? So I was really excited. I'd read a ton about American Civil War battles and I understood them. So as a new umpire, find a period that you're interested in, but do not do your favorite battle. And I think that will solve for a variety of woes. And the first thing to start on after you've done that is go to get your Discord skills down, not TTS, not rule sets. Use the James D6 or the James D8, depending on your mood. Use the James D6, do a simple battle, and then learn Discord. You will save yourself so much pain if you understand roles, if you understand how to do channels very quickly, if you understand how to move people between channels very quickly, if you get the Discord skills down, which is where 90% of the action happens, it solves for a multitude of problems. So once you get good at Discord, you have your period, you can then start to open up. But a lot of people start with like, does anyone have a rule set? Right? And that's one of those, you're just going to get stuck in the mud, right? If you go on that. Don't worry. There's a rule set called the James D6. Use that one, right? That's what you start with. Get 4 people and go play a game with it, right? You're going to find out how much you don't understand Discord when you do that. I didn't know. It was like my 8th game where I learned about roles. I was like manually putting
Yeah,
people's names in and all that. And so someone said, no, dummy, use roles, right?
it
So,
took me a couple servers to figure that out as well. So
right.
don't feel too bad.
And like, but once you get roles, it's like, and actually the reason that someone told me about roles is that Discord was having a hiccup. And so people were disappearing from channels. I don't know. I
Mm.
mean, you might even remember the period where it was like there's a weird thing where people were dropping out of channels, and someone said, "Well, it's not doing it for roles." And I said, "What's roles?" And they said, "What's roles?" And then boom, the whole thing opened up. So roles, get the roles down. Get how to do that. Get the Discord skills up, and you'll be in good shape. That's my new umpire. For other umpires, you, me, Swentz. I love Swentz, by the way. Swentz is one of my favorite guys. Great sense of humor. Um, Tomas, I mean, just KB, for all of us, how do we be great? Not just productive or good or like how do we become like an art form? because I think we have the talent to figure that out. I think that's the most intriguing thing. How do we make this like something that is like mind blowing?
Hmm.
So if just open up to the possibility that this isn't like a grinding out thing where I can entertain, 10 of my buddies and throw a bunch of cannons at each other and all that, but how can I actually take and use AI to create something that is completely off the reservation good? Like, what is that? I think if we created that as a group of umpires, that would be far more interesting than just introducing Kriegsspiel to the world. Everybody knows about Kriegsspiels. It's actually not that secret, right? It's the original war game and bunny hop and all that stuff, right? But like, how do we create a thing that's so mind-blowingly new that people say, like, these guys came up with something crazy good? It's all out there. So, yeah, there you
That
go.
is a good question. I think that's one we'll have to have conversations to come from on the active umpire and master umpire channels. Figure that out.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you just look at from the 2 years that we've been working together in the IKS, the level of conversation's gone from can you run a live Saturday without people waiting 50 minutes for a turn, right? To now, like, how do we create a live game and have it filmed in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or in Pennsylvania with the Little Wars TV? If you think about how far along this group has come, it's shocking. So now just take that same level of development and flip it around and look at like 2 years from now, what can we be doing? More live Saturdays? Sure. Right. But can we really push it? And I think that's the fun stuff.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time. I, I feel like I knew you pretty well, but I learned a lot more about you in this, so it was
Wow.
good
My
for me,
pleasure.
and I hope the rest of the IKS community pulls nuggets of wisdom from you as well.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure doing this. And we are going to interview all active umpires. Eventually you'll get on the list and eventually we'll get to you. It's completely a scheduling problem, not a priority problem. So I hope in the creation of this podcast for us, by us, to us, we've made it clear that we're not just about like the five umpires that everybody knows. We're going to interview everyone because I think every single umpire has a unique idea. I've literally learned from every single one of them. So we're going to keep doing this. I think this is one of the more important conversations we've been having. And it's fun to sit in this side of the chair because when I interview, I want to make sure that the umpire gets all the airtime. But I appreciate you. You pushed me into this schedule wise and getting this going. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.